Hi, welcome to Mental Health Monday, friends. Today is our last episode on our series about empathy with Christy Hansard, and she is a RN, a parish nurse, and a deaconess intern. So she has a lot of different vocational hats, which also means a lot of different vocational contacts and gifts to have a broad perspective on this topic. Yeah, experiences too. It's true, like we are made up of not just knowledge, but also those experiences. And I think that's a really important point when we move into the topic of empathy is understanding that people are complex. And so we're worried about their heads, their hearts, their bodies, the whole schlemiel, their spirits, not just one of those components. And so that's one thing as we talk about empathy in all places today. We're going to talk about how to have empathy in person and then also how to have empathy online. And I think there's some different tips we can give for both of those places. But in all of that, looking at the whole person, and we've talked about different kinds of empathy, perspective empathy, as well as heart and feeling empathy, and then turning that into compassionate conversation and action. And so, Christy, what do you think? What are some skills and some tips for people for having empathy in person?
I always find it very interesting because some people are grateful that you had a conversation with them, or that you took time out of your day, or it could be that you dropped off a devotional book, so it's something tangible. But there's different ways of showing empathy other than just, one-on-one. You give somebody something, they receive it, and you're done. So I think that first of all, is using maybe some assessment skills of what kind of empathy is this. Maybe incorporate some of your past experiences with that person. If they were very appreciative of, coming over with some cookies or coming with a card, or is it just how we talk to each other? Is it the calm that we bring to their storm?
Yeah, that's really good. Understanding that it's in the context of a relationship, so we have some information to guide us about that person in particular, not just about what empathy is. I think that's really, really helpful. You mentioned assessment skills, and so I think this is something that we all kind of naturally have a little bit of, really like walking into a situation, looking for facial cues, looking for some other cues like verbal, what people are saying, as well as if you're in their home or in a space, kind of looking around, just like when you read, like look for the context clues. But then there can be ways to learn assessment skills too. And so just encouraging, there is a space to get more knowledge and more information. So go on the internet and look for some ideas about assessing what people need. That's a really not limited to nursing or social work or those spaces that we are in, but especially in ministry. So anyone with professional ministry or volunteer ministry. And I think programs like Stephen's Ministry trains in certain basic ways to assess what someone really needs versus even just like taking it from what they're saying or taking it based solely on what you think. Of course, that's not actually empathy.
I think one of my best examples is the grocery store. It always is the grocery store. So, and it can be before work, after work, whether I've got plenty of time and I'm doing meal plans down an aisle, or if I just run in to grab some quick things. Mm-hmm. So I think for professional church workers, we're used to sometimes personal space being invaded in a public place. But if you are an average person and you're in the grocery store, there's definitely different levels. So it's just, oh, hi, I haven't seen you. How are you doing? And the person may say, I'll call you later. We can talk more. So respecting that they do want to talk to you, but not right now in the grocery store. Mm-hmm. There are other people that will kind of come up and whisper, hey, can you keep my husband in your prayers? We're waiting for some test results at the doctor's office. Will do. And then there's been people that are just very blatant and they're like, oh my gosh, this is a God thing. I ran into you. I need to pray with somebody. So on more than one occasion at Kroger's, I have had to stop in the middle and be okay with public prayer. Mm-hmm. And not worry about what other people think about what we're doing, or the conversation that you're having, or if that it gets interrupted, right? Because you could have somebody that says, oh, excuse me, and now that connection is broken, and how do you pick that back up? So that can be in the middle of you talking to somebody, but it could also be at the end. Like, what do you do at the end of that conversation? And we talked about that before, right? Expectations, what do you do next? Sorry, we're getting interrupted. How about I call you later today? And sometimes they say, no, I'm good. I mean, they may have gotten what they needed. And again, just continually assessing, what they may or may not need and in what form.
I think that's really helpful. And being able to assess, I wonder what the listeners, what our viewers and stuff that are joining us right now, how have you used cues? What cues do you look for? Maybe you have a story, or maybe you have some basic assessment ideas of some categories you might use to be able to see where a person's at. And sometimes this happens really quickly, and we both completely understand that, which also means anytime we're going to try to apply a skill in a short period of time, there is a high risk and error rate, right? So leaning into what we talked about last time, grace on the front end and grace on the back end. Leaning into that awkward if our prayer gets interrupted, or with technology right now, people are getting, the technology goes down, somebody gets cut off, they can't quite hear. We talked on KFUO this morning about accidentally talking over someone, like things like that will happen. But as C.S. Lewis says, love itself requires vulnerability. And so there's going to be risk because you engage with a person, and that means that God's going to do some really great stuff with that. It doesn't need to look perfect. And I think so often we get blocked up in sharing empathy because we have this idea of what it would look perfectly. And so I love your grocery store example because it just reminds us the situation isn't perfect, but it wouldn't require empathy if the situation was perfect, right? And then the context isn't perfect. God works in those weaknesses too. That's probably where he does some of his best work, and that's important. So another thing I had written down too is active listening skills then. So when we think about active listening skills, we're especially thinking about a lot of nonverbal cues, or repeating back what someone said, and not like a robot, but kind of like summarizing, contextualizing, just so the person feels heard. Do you have any tips on active listening, Christy?
I think the biggest one is not trying to prepare an answer while you're trying to listen. I think that's the first step. So many times we're so used to responding to maybe not respond, and it's okay to have those quiet moments in a conversation. So it's okay to take a deep breath. Sometimes people aren't done too. So we're so quick to fix and we've already said that empathy is not fixing, but to jump in. So sometimes I'll just take a deep breath and go, okay, it's my turn to talk. Or sometimes you take a deep breath and you're like, oh, they're not done. So, and then you let them, because sometimes they can verbally process it out themselves, and they just needed a person in the room to do that with. So, and you didn't need to say anything. I think the other thing is that I love what you said about grace, because there needs to be a whole bunch of it, because we're not perfect and we're going to misstep. There was one time someone had come into the church office, and I thought that I was showing empathy, and it turned into an offense. And so they walked away, and I went, well, that didn't go the way I wanted it to. And I think that we learn just as much in those moments as we do that when they go well. So I sat on it for a day. I prayed about it. I had a good night rest, and I had a good meal. Those are kind of like, before I make decisions, kind of benchmarks for me. And I realized, nope, I really do. So I just asked God to go with me, and I called that person, and I just had to be honest and say, I'm really sorry that the conversation went the way it went yesterday. That was not my intent. This is what I wanted to say, or this is what I was trying to convey. And I don't think I've had that go wrong yet. Sometimes they're like, yeah, you picked a wrong time. And you just have to kind of swallow your pride and go, yep, I did. So, or that word did not help me. I'm so sorry. I was unaware that those particular words or, saying that would upset you. My intent is to calm the situation, or show that I care about you and I'm concerned about what you're going through. So I think honesty is another thing that we can suggest. And not, if you make a mistake, trying to cover it up with, well, I did my best and, I'm sorry. Again, it's the way you say it. I think if you bring some genuine concern to the situation, that's always your best bet.
Yes, I love how I think what I heard you just say is owning not just your intentions. So often we easily own our intentions. Like, I tried to convey this, but also owning the perception of what was received. That's part of, I think, really high levels of empathy, is ownership of my mistakes in this whole relational process. That will go so far in delivering empathy, I think, far more than the words we say that are like, oh, I'm so sorry, and this really stinks. And those things are really a place for empathy. But I think those relational contexts where it's not going great or we did mess up, there is so much empathy conveyed in saying, I know I'm a sinner and let's work on this together. I need forgiveness. That, I think, does convey empathy, and we forget that. We forget that there's a place for that. So I
think another thing that we can suggest is sometimes when someone is in the midst of hurting or they're suffering and you enter that with them, they bite back. They don't mean to, but they may bite back with something that they know will hurt you, and not taking that, realizing where it's coming from. And, they will probably come back and apologize for it, or it's an opportunity for that relationship to grow. So again, I don't want people to be fearful that there's going to be a misstep. It can be scary when you first try that, but I think that that's what we're called to do. I don't think that we're supposed to sit in our suffering or our processing things that are yucky, so to speak, by ourselves. I think that we're definitely called to do that with each other.
Right. No, I really love that. And before we go on to like empathy online, I just want to turn people to, if you struggle with that whole, stepping forward and taking the risk of that vulnerability and empathy, the book Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown is really helpful in helping us identify that place for imperfection in our relationships. And what, it's not a Christian book. There might even be a little bit of language in it, but, I think that with our Christian hats on and our lenses, we can see the way that God is using that vulnerability in empathy, especially. So that's a good resource. And really that place of honoring who that person is and what they're going through, not one or the other. I think so often we honor what they're going through, but forget it in the context of this person, or we honor that person and kind of push aside what they're going through. So honoring both, that is a good thing, and holding them together.
And if you're not in the right place, like if you're dealing with your own stuff and you don't have it to give, finding the language to let that person know. So let's say you call me and I'm in the middle of a whole lot going on in my house and it's not the right time or place. I can say, you know what, I can't do this right now. Can we do this? Can I call you later? Can I call you tomorrow? Can I call you this weekend? I mean, putting some parameters on it, because the other person will probably expect you to follow through.
That's true. And I think we forget to give people that piece of grace, to say, hey, we have an actual relationship, so I'm going to tell you where I'm at a little bit without throwing a burden on you. But like, hey, the kids need food and I'm not really able to give you my full attention. Like, can I call you, let me look real fast, Tuesday at 8 p.m.? There is no shame in that. And I think we give people our healthiest, most mentally well selves when we do enact both grace and boundaries. Boundaries are grace filled as well. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I like that.
So empathy online. I think this is the topic probably a lot of people have been waiting for. We're not going to hit on everything. Tomorrow's blog will have some specifics too about reaching out in empathy online, and some ideas, like very practical ideas for reaching out online and how to express greater empathy when you are connecting, especially on social media. But we're also talking emails here. And I think since we're in the pandemic that we're in right now, a lot of people are experiencing Zoom, and that's like a weird in-between of like in-person and online. And I think we need to be honest that really that's more online. Like we're only getting that two-dimensional of someone. And so how do we engage in empathy differently online? And you had a couple of good tips, so I'll let you go first, Christy.
I think one of the things I've noticed is that if you see somebody that may present like they need empathy online, just because they need it doesn't necessarily mean that you're the one to give it. So sometimes saying nothing is the best policy. I feel like in the middle of this pandemic, being a nurse, I wait till somebody contacts me for information. I've reached out to a couple of people, but certainly professionally, but also personally, that's not the place. That's not the place for it. I think you and I talked earlier that if somebody is demonstrating that they need to talk to somebody or that they need some empathy, that it doesn't become like this empathy one-upper. Like her prayer was better than mine, or, oh, I didn't use that word. And I think that we need to let all of that go and realize what's really important. My favorite thing to do is to private message somebody. So if somebody's, let's say their pet in the middle of the pandemic has passed away, and they put that online, I will private message them and say, I'm so sorry for your loss, or, I'll start the conversation there in a private place. That may spill over into a phone call, like, you've gone back and forth a few times and they may need more. So I say, are you free tonight? Can I call you? And that can go either way. No, I'm very busy and I'm staying busy, so I don't talk about it. Or, yeah, I would really appreciate that. I think the other thing, especially for parish nursing, we do home visits, we do hospital visits, and we can't do that right now. So we set up with a creative way that I'm doing phone visits. And so I have certain times that there are some people that may want some more time or some more structured time where they need more than just a one time. So I will set up, let's say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1 o'clock. So I know that at 1 o'clock I'll talk to that person and they can look forward to it so they don't feel like they're intruding on our time. So I know that was a lot, but
no,
those are some suggestions.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to consider too, like the arena, even online. So it's not like this black or white thing, like we're either in person or we're online. But what is that person's communication love language is what I like to consider. Are they going to be, more likely to hear what you're saying and receive it and take it in by text or by private message or by, a Facebook. I do know the occasional person who a Facebook like public post is like really meaningful for them, or, but just, know your content. Before you move into that, but also know the person again and what is their best way to receive information. And so I think that really gives us some insight into then moving things around. So if you start out in a comment thread, you might at any time move it to a private message. I like your tip that if you private message someone, that is a space where you could maybe get the conversation going more, if that's your goal. If that's not your goal, then be aware that might get the conversation going more. Are you prepared to offer some energy into that? Same thing with email. So often I think we really consider as a professional thing. We're more likely to integrate that into kind of businesses or professions and things than we do relationships. But I have noticed that I can type a lot in an email compared to what I can type or receive in a private message. So there is a place for saying, hey, can I email you this? Like, so I can get to my keyboard. I'll use that language a lot. Like, I want to get to my keyboard for this, which means I'm not going to be able to pick it out on my phone and have autocorrect all in between it and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
So just, being upfront, I think, with the need for how we want to communicate with people, lean into that awkwardness of it, like in relationship that's really served well. And then I think one of my last tips I want to tell you is that so often the thing that happens online is that we aren't seeing people. Instead, we're seeing words, right? So we're responding to words. So I want to give you the tip to look at the person's picture, like whether you go to their profile picture or whether you look at a picture you have of them. But before you engage, and like you said, there has to be some parameters for like stepping back a lot of times before we respond. That was such a good tip. But also take time to look at the person, because it's just really easy, especially when something gets heated, or like you said, that we want to have our prayer be a little bit better than the person who posted right before us, or just those really weird social dynamics. No shame. It just is the reality of social media. How can we remember that we're talking about a real person that we care about, and we want to, emotionally join in with them? So that would be a way to do that, is look at their picture, just have a recollection of who they are in your life before you respond. So yeah, Linda says in the comments, private message feels more personal and caring when I'm hurting. And I think that's what Christy's point is. I think there should be a lot more private messaging going on in our life so often than there is versus, posting and commenting on social media in particular. That's really, I need to take that to heart. I need to do that a little bit more often. And I love getting private messages myself. I would rather engage with people in that way. And I think that's a lesson well learned for all of us.
I think one of the things too is that if you do reach out to somebody in some kind of texting form, right? So whether it's through social media or a text message through your phone or an email, I found that there could be such a disconnect that when you see that person in person the next time, sometimes you forget, like you said, to see their picture. I think will help a lot, because if you see them again, whether at the grocery store or at church or something like that, it's very easy to forget that you had that conversation because you don't have that many connections, if that makes sense. Like when you're in person, seeing somebody's face, you have visual, audible, you have all these engagements, but just in the written word, it seems to limit those.
No, that's a really good point. Like our memories especially will be limited because our memories are designed through the sensory system in particular. And that's like one tenet of, EMDR and a lot of memory processing theories. And so understanding that when we're only taking in one sense or two, maybe tops, and we're not getting the full experience, then our memories will be, it's not you, it's not your age, it's not your, complications of life. A lot of time that has to do with your actual ways that your memories were made to store. And it's okay. And again, like you said, honesty, being upfront is like, we were talking about something really important last time. What was it? Or something like that. Or something happened and you posted about it recently. Be upfront with a tone of compassion. That would be like a really great way to engage when you're being honest. Watch for sarcasm and watch for like kind of critical ways of expressing things, but with a tone of compassion, move forward in that conversation and empathy. Awesome. Well, this was a great conversation. I hope everyone listening enjoyed it. I think we could talk forever, but it's been 23 minutes now. And so we love to hear from you. I want to hear some stories. If anybody has been shared some empathy that was really meaningful for you, please share with us, because I think we can, while we can't generalize everything, I think we can learn some things from people's experiences and stories, like Christy said. And then also, if you have certain ways that you move forward in empathy, certain things that you remember, certain tools or skills that you use, please share with us in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And so tomorrow will be our final blog post at HeidiGaiman.com on empathy. And like I said, you'll have more tools for social media, in particular with empathy. And then we will also go to a couple of posts in May and maybe a couple of lives, but those will be like more like surprise, right? We'll keep it spontaneous, and then we'll take our summer break for Mental Health Mondays, and we'll be back in August. Next year's theme is developmental theories, and so we'll really talk about lifespan development. And I'm sure, Christy, you can already see your eyes like light up with ideas, right? Yeah, and we'll have lots of guests, and maybe Christy will join us again. So it's been fun.
Thank you so much. This is just. And for people that don't know, people that know me know that this is so far out of my range for communication. Like, this is just, I'm a in person, have a cup of coffee kind of gal. So I think God has definitely stretched me, and I thank you for the opportunity for the stretching.
No, that's awesome. Don't we all need to be stretched? I feel like that's one of my places in the world, is to stretch people a little bit, but to do it in a comfortable way. So I love that. I love that. That's awesome. And that goes perfectly with empathy. I have empathy for you. I know this isn't everything. And you have done beautifully, beautifully. So everybody in the comments, give a give a hey holler for Christy and her braveness and boldness in sharing her knowledge with us. We are blessed. We are blessed by you. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Make sure you thank Heidi too.
Bye, friends.